whether you're big or small, it's often really hard to be precise about what you do and what it means for your customers. And it's just difficult because you're not a customer. And you've got lots of different customers and they all have different benefits. And so, I mean, that normally takes time, and it's very rare that you ever get that done first time. And if you're working with a large enterprise client, they can spend days, weeks, months on this. And they've got teams of people who can spend days, weeks, months. Smaller startups, it's much harder because you're much more resource strapped. But I think spending the time really getting clear about what the value is in working with you as a company, whether it's buying a product or a service or whatever, is really important. And then the next question is about who do you tell? And when we talk about marketing, we don't talk about tactics particularly. We don't talk about PR and email marketing. We talk about content generation and content delivery. And basically, you've got to create something that's going to make people want to buy, and you've got to get it in front of the people who are going to buy. I mean, it's all marketing has to do, really. And getting it in front of the people who want to buy, I think, is different. To me, the secret is always, always, always to focus down. And it's much easier to go broader once you've got a campaign that's really narrow than it is to narrow down once you've got a broad campaign. So, a lot of what people are talking about at the moment in terms of in marketing is around focus. So one of the things you'll hear is account-based marketing. And for us in business to business, it's almost how business to business marketing is being run now, where what you're trying to do is you're really focusing on marketing on specific target companies. The times we believe we're too focused is when we can't spend the marketing budget. So if you've got a certain amount of budget, and let's say, classic way to target specific companies on LinkedIn, using LinkedIn advertising, it's a really easy model. You just advertise to everyone with a certain job title in a certain list of companies. So you might want to advertise, if we're promoting our services, we might want to advertise to marketing directors and CMOs in this list of 20 companies we want to reach. If we've got a budget that we want to spend that's, I don't know, say $5,000 a month in terms of ad spend, and we're only spending $50 a month, we're probably too focused.
Got it.
But I think until you get to the point where you go, I literally don't know how to spend my marketing budget, you're probably too broad. Well, thanks for having me on the podcast. And the dinner table growing up is a great question because it was kind of messy. So when I was a child, us kids, we all did different sports. We're all going away, either me playing cricket or football or my sister dancing. And I have to be honest, my mum, bless her, was not the best cook in the world. So it tended to be fairly ad hoc and very informal. And usually not the entire family. So almost always one day, one of us was out doing something, but that was good because we were out doing things. So a little bit different, but certainly fun.
Very cool. Very cool. And were you exposed to entrepreneurialism or anything growing up as a young person, or did that not hit you until later on?
Not really. So, I guess my first exposure to entrepreneurialism was really at university. Where I got involved in lighting and sound for rock bands. We had a group that did that, and we had to make money from it. Of course, the only reason we had to make money is we wanted to buy new kit and buy all the cool toys.
Sure.
But
exactly.
So that was kind of my first real introduction to being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, love it. And what was it that you like? So were you doing all of that sort of on your own? Doing all the setup or the production work or whatever it was? Did you start your own company that did specifically that, or how did you kind of stumble into it?
No, not at all. It was so I actually did a bit of amateur dramatics before
Very cool.
I came to university and decided that actually doing lighting and sound for bands was way cooler than doing lighting and sound for plays. And there was a group that did it. That was, frankly, organized by the students, but really well organized, quite a big team. And they had, they averaged more than one event a night. They were, obviously a lot of discos at university, but also a lot of live music at the university I went to as well. So it was such an amazing opportunity to do different things and, learn about something you'd normally never get involved in.
Yeah, that is cool. That is very cool. So what was your role like actually setting everything up? Were you managing, any of the setups, or what was kind of your initial contribution into that first, I guess, exploration of entrepreneurialism?
So it was all over the place. I mean, basically, the students ran the group that did it, so you could pretty much do what you liked.
Mhm.
And obviously, you started off, you were kind of learning how to, initially carry the big, heavy flight cases of all the
Mhm.
equipment backwards and forwards, which clearly, everyone has to do. But then you sort of started to get to learn about how to use a mixing desk for live bands, or how to set up lighting for a large disco, or set up lighting for live music. So got to do all that, which was just an amazing opportunity.
Yeah, that's cool. That's very cool. I've always wondered, all the switches and the sliders and all of that stuff. Like, how the hell does anybody know what any of those things, do and that? So interesting when I guess get to actually see how that all works and is all put together. What happened next? What was your next step that you took after you
Well,
after you graduated, or what have you?
yeah, so interesting. Once I graduated, I decided I quite enjoyed that whole music scene. So I actually went off and spent some time designing the mixing desks that I was using.
Oh, wow.
So actually I was an electronics engineer. That was my major at university. And so I actually went and designed the stuff, some of the kit I'd used, which was really cool.
Yeah. Wow. That's impressive. And did you commercialize any of that, or is that, something that was more, sort of for your own use at that point?
No, no, it was very much a job. So I was working as an electronics design engineer, working for a company that did that. So it was very much working within an organization rather than being entrepreneurial. In fact, I kind of flirted with a bit of I'd like to do this, I'd like to that, but never really was entrepreneurial until later in my career.
And what was it that you feel like was sort of that, that moment when you arrived, or that inspiration that said, yeah, I'm really going to do this. What was it that, sort of set you over that edge?
Well, definitely the inspiration was wine. So the company I was working for sent me on a management development course. It was a week's residential, classic one. You have the last night, everybody's having a drink, winding down, having a chat. And a couple of people said, Mike, you should run your own company. And initially I thought, that's fantastic. I think I'll be great at running a company. And then I thought, yeah, actually, probably what they're saying is that I just really would never want to be your boss, Mike. So running a company, I'll never have to be your boss. That'd be great. But anyway, they sort of suggested this idea. And then a couple of months afterwards, the agency that I was working with, I was a marketing manager at the time, the founders wanted to retire. They're looking to sell the agency. And I thought, hey, it can't be that hard, can it? So I decided to buy an agency with literally not one day's experience working agency side.
Wow. Wow. And I mean, what did you feel like you could do something better, or was there something that that drew you to this? I mean, you had to have seen something there that liked you, or inspired you. What was that?
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, I think if you look at what's happened in terms of different industries, technology's had such an incredible impact on publishing and on marketing. So
Yeah.
this was back in 2000. Well, I started in 2000, actually bought the agency in 2001.
Okay.
And, I could see the world was changing, and it was changing from a situation where basically you went out, you bought journalists meals, they wrote what you asked them to write. Pretty simple.
Yeah.
Into something where there was going to be a lot more technology. Journalists were going to have to see their entire business change from creating printed publications through to creating sometimes entirely online publications. So I could see this massive transition happening, and to me that was really exciting. As someone who used to be an engineer who loved technology, it just seemed like a great industry to be in.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's interesting. So when were you serving any specific industries or anything like that, or did you go in and sort of niche yourself to any specific industry, or were you basically serving pretty well anyone who who you could get in contact with?
So, I mean, the good thing was it was very focused around, at the time, around electronic components. That was basically the business of the agency. So, predominantly silicon chips and
Mhm.
products like that. That was obviously to a large extent my background, which is why I was working with the agency, because they were specialists. And the two founders, actually, when they initially started the agency, they were both working in that industry. So it all came from that. We're now broader as an agency.
Mhm.
But we're still 100% business to business and 100% technology products for business. So we've still retained a focus, albeit we've got bigger and therefore a little bit broader.
And when you're saying technology products for businesses, are you building things for people, or are you or for companies, or are you building your own proprietary sort of internal systems and then reselling them to your clients?
No. So we're doing the marketing for our clients. So
Okay.
we're basically working with clients, and we have some, some IP, but not really a major amount. It's really about helping clients market their products. So that to me is why you should work in an agency, is because you can work on so many different products.
Yeah.
So in the morning I can talk to somebody who's selling silicon chips. At lunchtime it might be communication systems, and then in the afternoon it's, I don't know, baggage handling systems for airports. I mean, just
Yeah.
amazing range of really exciting industries.
Yeah. So, and that's interesting. So you're focused in on these very specific industries, and obviously this isn't something like, when I think marketing, I'm thinking like an ad in a magazine, or some kind of banner ad that's being published or anything like that. Do you still use those same types of methodologies for these very, very specific things, like you said, like the airport, airport baggage handling systems and all of that? Like, what, is there any kind of research, I guess is the question that you go through that says, these are sort of our avenues that we can use to be able to, promote your products and, go from there? Or again, is it very much so, we can try Google AdWords and test things as you go? Like, I guess, what is your philosophy there? What is your
But
approach?
yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Matt, because when I first bought the agency, a lot of it was fundamentally based on opinion. People
Mhm.
thought this would work. They felt this magazine was influential. Today, with digital marketing, we're moving to a situation where we've got far better ability to understand what works and what doesn't work.
Mhm.
So the answer is, do we want run banner ads? Absolutely.
Mhm.
And there are places where we want to run banner ads, and there's goals we want to achieve where banner ads help. Do we want print ads? Yeah, actually, I think we still do, but really very few.
Yeah.
And there are a few specific reasons why we run it, particularly, maybe there's a country where, predominantly the market is still print. And that's particularly in Eastern Europe, where print is still quite strong, or maybe Germany.
Mhm.
But, absolutely, we run those standard tactics, but we do them in a much more intelligent way. So we're looking at what happens after someone clicks a banner ad.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, people talk about click-through rates and ads. That's a terrible metric. It really doesn't tell you very much. But
Yeah.
what happens on your website afterwards, whether they go and buy a product or not, that's a really good metric. So we're using a lot of data to actually understand what people are doing and what our advertising and our marketing does to change their behavior in a way that means they're more likely to buy.
Yeah. Yeah. So really you're focused in, obviously, on the conversion ratios, and that's, kind of the part that matters, rather than necessarily click-through rates and all that other stuff.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because conversions is it's a difficult word in marketing, because typically it's associated with the sale.
Okay.
And in some clients, absolutely, it's a case of you bring a client onto the website, you can get a sale because they've got some online e-commerce, and we absolutely measure that. But equally, we have clients who might have sales cycles of a year or
Mhm.
2 years, or even one client, up to 20 years.
Wow.
And so their conversions are not necessarily what you might think of as conversions. It could be engagement with particular content. It could be downloading something. It could be maybe filling in a form. But it's much less defined than maybe you'd think. There's lots of different things you have to think about. And so I mean, this whole idea of building this concept of a customer journey where you think of your ideal customer and you think about what steps they're going to take. If they're just going to come onto Amazon and buy a product, it's pretty simple. But if they're looking to develop something that uses a piece of technology that takes 2 years of design work to make use of, then that's really complicated. And that's where it gets super interesting for me, is because you're looking at, I guess you could call them micro conversions, little steps that say, yes, we've moved that person forward in the journey. And it's not like a classic conversion. We've got a registration or we've sold something. But it's the same kind of idea.
Yeah. Yeah. And are you able to track and measure that on an individual basis? So that John came to the website originally a year ago, and John's back at the website, taking the next step. So he's more apt to, be a client than, maybe somebody who just came on and didn't really necessarily do anything. Are you able to get that granular with it?
So definitely a lot of the marketing automation technology that exists today absolutely is doing that kind of thing. But it's interesting because I talked about customer journeys, and a lot of people in marketing will build this journey, and they'll say somebody will do this, they'll do this, they'll do this, they'll do this, and eventually they'll become a customer.
Yeah.
And I can tell you almost none of the people who become customers actually follow that journey.
Okay.
It's a pretty good approximation, but it's never exact. So yes, we can track people. We've got, information about what people are doing on the website, how they're engaging with email, all this kind of stuff that people know is available in digital marketing. But it's not as elegant and pretty as you might imagine. It's very messy. So delving through that data and getting the real story from behind the data is actually one of the big challenges. It's not something that you press a button, you get a magic report and it says, 53 people went exactly through your journey and they ended up customers. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So what does that a deliverable look like? Is it, a bunch of spreadsheets, here's all your raw traffic, these are the people that made it over here? Like, is there any kind of rhyme or reason, or, what would be the, I don't want to say the correct way to do it, but, the way that is arranging the data so that at least it's understandable? Because I think that's maybe what the intention is, with the customer journey, like here's a path that people can understand, and, then you can, track through that. But, maybe there's somebody that takes a shortcut through that path and they come in at, the step number 3. How is it that you're able to measure all of that and relay that in a way that people can digest and, make decisions off of it? I guess, I know that's a really, really big, broad, answer, but I'm just curious, are there tools that you typically are using, a bunch of spreadsheets that are compiled together that are, delivering this, or, what is that, I guess, mashing of information look like? And then what does that deliverable look like, at the end?
So that's a brilliant question. And I mean, I could spend days answering this. There's all sorts of tools with all sorts of different approaches to say you've got this many people at this stage. Typically, it's kind of the funnel model that everyone's familiar with. Start off with awareness, interest, desire, action is a very simple one, and you get more people at the awareness stage, you do at the action stage, you measure how many there are, it's really simple. You have all these measurements. They're good, but actually they're never as good as someone just sitting down and explaining in simple, words what they're trying to achieve with a campaign. And to me, that's always the most compelling thing. And if we can sit down with a client and the client can say, what I'm trying to do is, I think there's a number of people out there who, for example, know that we're a vendor in this market, but they've got no idea that we do this. And they've got no idea that because we do this, it means this for them. And if they could only read this and do this, then they would understand our benefits. And so suddenly you have a really simple description in English of what you're trying to achieve. And that then becomes very easy to measure. And I think there is a danger with marketing today that people get kind of seduced by the numbers. You can have these spreadsheets and spreadsheets and spreadsheets of numbers. And you can say, my click-through rate's gone up 0.3%, and that's got to be good. And it's like, well, is it good? I don't know. It's it could just be randomness, let's be honest. So I think it's about, really trying to understand what you're trying to achieve and putting that into, simple language rather than trying to be pretentious and putting it into numbers and metrics, or even to some extent trying to remove all those 3-letter acronyms that everybody loves, and just trying to say what you're trying to achieve. And then that then becomes easy to measure. Quite often it is a spreadsheet, sometimes it's a graph, sometimes it's just a number. So it often gets down to that. But usually if you understand what you're trying to measure and really understand it, then actually the measurement becomes less complex, and also the tools become much easier to navigate.
Yeah. Do you have any advice on how we'll say a client, or someone who is in a position to be your client, how do they answer the question of where do we start? Right? Maybe they don't. Do they always seem to have an inclination that hey, we're missing market share here, or there's this new thing that we're coming out with that we're trying to promote? Is there any, I guess, steps or things that they can to go through if they think that they have something, but they don't necessarily know whether or not there's something there to derive or to get at that story that you can use to then sort of craft this campaign?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question, because there's kind of two ways to answer that. I mean, one is talking about how they explain what they do. So I mean, as a marketing person, I go, this is all about messaging and positioning. And I think that is really hard for most companies. Whether you're big or small, it's often really hard to be precise about what you do and what it means for your customers. And it's just difficult because you're not a customer. And you've got lots of different customers, and they all have different benefits. And so, I mean, that normally takes time, and it's very rare that you ever get that done first time. And if you're working with a large enterprise client, they can spend days, weeks, months on this. And they've got teams of people who can spend days, weeks, months. Smaller startups, it's much harder because you're much more resource strapped. But I think spending the time really getting clear about what the value is in working with you as a company, whether it's buying a product or a service or whatever, is really important. And then the next question is about, who do you tell? And when we talk about marketing, we don't talk about tactics particularly. We don't talk about PR and email marketing. We talk about content generation and content delivery. And basically, you've got to create something that's going to make people want to buy, and you've got to get it in front of the people who are going to buy. I mean, it's all marketing has to do, really. And getting it in front of the people who want to buy, I think, is different. To me, the secret is always, always, always to focus down. And it's much easier to go broader once you've got a campaign that's really narrow than it is to narrow down once you've got a broad campaign. So, a lot of what people are talking about at the moment in terms of in marketing is around focus. So one of the things you'll hear is account-based marketing. And for us in business to business, it's almost how business to business marketing is being run now, where what you're trying to do is you're really focusing on marketing on specific target companies. And again, if you're a small startup, that could be a small number. I mean, that can literally be a handful of companies. If you're a big enterprise, it could be 1,000 or 5,000. But focusing down is really good for two reasons. One, it's really clear whether you're working or not, because whether you've converted the companies that you're trying to convert to customers or not. And then secondly, the great thing about focus is that it means that you can really target the message to your ideal customers so easily. And as I say, as a startup, it could be 3 companies, it could be really focused down. But actually the reality is, if you target those 3 companies, there's probably 30 or 300 or 3,000 that actually will look at that messaging and look at the things you're saying and go, wow, that applies to me as well.
Yeah, they're talking to me.
So it's easier to get that messaging done. So, those two things linked together, what you say and how you say it, and then who you say it to. And the focus on who you say it to really helps the messaging as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have any, I guess, guidance on, like you said, that there's normally a marketing person or some type of internal person who's helping with, the marketing side of things. And you also mentioned that people have a tendency maybe to not necessarily focus as much. Any insight into how whether or not you're focused enough or, are you still looking at, too broad of an audience? Because I completely agree. I think that, most people would say, I'm in an industry that everybody can use. That's going to be great. I can talk to everybody, and I'm going to hit a chord with everyone. But like you said, niching down into a smaller industry is easier to identify, with specific people. Is there a case where you might go too far, niche down too much, and sort of pass by people as well? So is there like a sweet spot to identify, I'm focused enough but broad enough? Does that kind of resonate? Any thoughts there?
I mean, that's a really tough question to answer. I think the way I'll answer that is slightly differently. The times we believe we're too focused is when we can't spend the marketing budget. So if you've got a certain amount of budget, and let's say, classic way to target specific companies on LinkedIn, using LinkedIn advertising, it's a really easy model. You just advertise to everyone with a certain job title in a certain list of companies. So you might want to advertise, if we're promoting our services, we might want to advertise to marketing directors and CMOs in, this list of 20 companies we want to reach.
Yeah.
If we've got a budget that we want to spend, that's, I don't know, say $5,000 a month in terms of ad spend, and we're only spending $50 a month, we're probably too focused.
Got it.
But I think until you get to the point where you go, I literally don't know how to spend my marketing budget, you're probably too broad.
Okay. That's a great perspective. Is, again, just sort of like the, testing of the marketing assets. You can kind of test what the market availability is too, as you go. I mean, maybe, you start spending, you can kind of just keep testing that, making sure that, you're getting a payoff on, whatever your marketing spend is. And then, assuming that you're doing well, then obviously you're going to invest in it. And if you can't afford to invest as much as you want, then you probably need to, or you can't afford to invest. Yeah. Can't afford to invest as much as you want, then you need to open it up some more, or I'm sorry, niche down some more. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I love that.
I think also that there is a danger that you just immediately go, well, we're going to do LinkedIn. We haven't spent all our budget. We're too narrow. I think one of the things you've got to do as well is think of other tactics. So, there's loads of ways to reach your target audience. And so just going down one channel is a bad idea. If you're only doing one channel, you're too broad, probably, in terms of your audience. You need to actually, again, niche down so that you've got multiple channels all trying to hit that audience.
Yeah.
And that might be LinkedIn, it might be email, it might be sending stuff through the post. There's all sorts of things you can do.
Yeah. And that's, I was just going to ask that question, because obviously we've got some, we've got LinkedIn, we've got Instagram, TikTok, and some of those may not necessarily be as applicable for, each one of the industries as other ones. How do you go about saying, this is our number one, this is sort of a secondary, is it, again, just a hunch and then testing to see, what kind of response you get at each one of those other, with those other avenues? Or, is there another means to be able to identify, this is a good channel to be able to go down?
I mean, great question. There's loads of ways to answer that. Firstly, I can just say, well, we've done this a lot, we know. And there's some truth in that. Then I could say, actually, we're really smart and we look at the data. And we know the kind of people who are on LinkedIn, and the ability to target stuff on LinkedIn means that, LinkedIn's going to be amazing. And TikTok, which is much broader, is going to be, and younger and less business related, is going to be much less effective. And that might be true. Let's be honest, sometimes you can run a campaign on a channel that you don't think is going to work, and it works really well. And the reason that you do it is the campaign matches the channel. So probably you've got someone who really cares about the channel. Someone who cares about TikTok might do a great TikTok campaign. And also you can stand out if you're unique in the channel. So I think it's a balance between taking what I call the sort of considered view. You look at the data, you look at the experience, you go, yeah, on balance, if I'm doing business to business, LinkedIn's cool. TikTok's bad. But equally, you never say no. And so always doing little experiments is always worth doing. People get great business to business results on Facebook, for example, particularly If you're targeting small businesses, amazing results can be done on
Mm-hmm.
Facebook. And yet, if you're trying to target enterprise sales, it really doesn't work. So I think it is hard to have generalizations. You can definitely say, on balance, this is my guess, but I'm going to allocate a little bit of budget, and I'm just going to try something crazy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to set 9 times out of 10 that crazy thing isn't going to work, but 1 time out of 10, I'm going to look like a genius, and that's all you need.
And what would you say is a good response rate, or whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, whether that be collecting an email, making a purchase, how do I know that, hey, there's something here, I need to invest more money into this, as opposed to, other things? Say you don't have any type of baseline established. This is, you sort of going out and establishing a baseline. Where is it that I know that I'm doing good, and, where can I do better?
Yeah, that I love that question. I absolutely love that question, because everybody goes, oh, what do I need? Is it 1%, 2%, 5%, 10%? And my answer is, it's when you make money. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So if we look at Napier, we're a marketing agency. The reality is we can take on 2 clients a month, probably 2 new clients a month. That's about it. If we take on more, we're then perhaps not going to do quite such a good job of taking them on. Certainly can't do it on a consistent basis. So we're going to take on two clients a month. I have thousands of visitors to my website every month. Actually, what's the conversion rate from that? Well, ultimately, the conversion rate can't be more than 2. Yeah, 2 from a month from thousands of people. So trying to up that conversion rate makes no sense. And the same thing might be true of emails and things like that. What you need to do is work out what you're trying to achieve, what results you need to get, and then look at that rate. So it will depend. We have clients who literally, we've got one client who's got 6 million customers in their database. And I can tell you, they send out an email, they'll get a lot of conversions on almost anything they send out. And they have, I can't remember, they offer 600 different suppliers, and I don't know how many, hundreds of thousands of products. So they're going to sell pretty much every time they send an email. And their job is to make sure they match the frequency of emails to what people want to see. And so it's all about the engagement with the email, which will ultimately drive the best return. We have other clients. I mentioned, clients who sell, big systems, whether it's baggage handling for airports or logistics, or, storage for supercomputers. Storage for supercomputers is a great example. Basically, if you run a supercomputer, you have a cycle for upgrades. And that typically is around 3 to 5 years, depending on, where you are. And so if I send you an email in the period where you're not upgrading, you're not going to buy. The conversion is 0. And the conversion should be 0, because they're not in the market. I want to keep them engaged. I want to keep them interested, but a conversion rate makes no sense. And so I think it's about understanding what you're trying to achieve, and then making sure you make money, and making sure you make money in the long term rather than the short term. There's no point hammering your list, making a load of money for 3 months, and then finding everyone has unsubscribed because they hate all your emails. So there is no good answer. There are standard benchmarks. Lots of people argue about standard benchmarks, whether it be open rates or click rates or whatever. But I think the best thing to do is Google it, see the argument, and find a number you feel happy with. If you really want that kind of percentage, but it's not the right way to do marketing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so do you work with pretty well any industry? And I can't remember, do we focus in more, or did you focus in more on like the semiconductor type industry at this point, or again, are you a little bit more broad?
So we're a little bit more broad than that, but we're pretty focused. So if we look at our primary industries, it would form into electronic components and semiconductors, industrial technology and industrial automation, and then communications and information technology. And those would be our 3 core markets there.
And if I was a customer, do I need to bring anything to the table? Do I need, should I be prepared with any type of numbers before we, engage at all? Or what types of things would I need to sort of have lined up to be able to, use your services?
The honest truth is you need a marketing problem. Because if your marketing is going well, I mean, keep doing what you're doing. I mean, honestly, what you need a marketing problem. And the great thing for us is, most businesses quite frequently hit a marketing problem, whether it's attracting new customers, retaining customers, going to new markets, launching new products, whatever it is. And so from our point of view, people coming to us with a challenge are the best clients. And that can be a startup that wants people to get to know them. It can be a established company that everybody knows that actually wants to give an impression of being more innovative rather than being seen as being, perhaps a bit behind. It can be a company that is well known for one product, wants to get known for another. I mean, all of these things are great projects to work with agencies with. And so it's those sort of things that drive clients to work with us.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And Mike, if people wanted to reach out and get in touch with you, learn more about your products, your services, what would be the best way to do that?
Well, a couple of ways. The website is napierb2b.com. I mean, I said we're B2B only. We're absolutely committed in our domain name. I'm the only Mike Maynard at Napier, so you can find me on LinkedIn. Or, if anybody wants to, just email me direct. I mean, most people will probably work out my email's mike@napierb2b.com. Send me an email. I'd love to talk to anyone who's listening. Love it.
Mike. Thank you so much for the insights into how marketing is working today, for a lot of companies. And it's always one of those things that, is really interesting. I think you again, answering the question that you did with how to start and how to know, what is successful, is sort of half the battle, I think, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand that. So thank you for explaining that. And I wish you nothing but success.
Thanks so much for having me on the podcast, Matt. I've really enjoyed the conversation.